What's going on, everybody? My name is Michael Weir, and today we are going to talk about a brand new movie from the DC universe called Shazam, Fury of the Gods. And clearly I don't have the power of the gods, because when I say Shazam, nothing happens. That's kind of annoying. But here's the thing, I do have the power to change my movie theater room, and that's what I'm currently doing. So if the background looks different than it normally does, that's because I'm currently in the middle of changing my whole movie theater room around. So I'm here in my office area and just shooting some reviews here until I finish. I've got some painting to do, I've got some windows to cover up. I covered all this in my inside review, but I am going to be doing a full movie theater room walkthrough as soon as I'm done, so keep on the lookout for that. But for now, let's talk about Shazam, Fury of the Gods. And so guys, Shazam, Fury of the Gods is directed by David F. Sandberg, and he's the same director that directed Annabelle Creation, so when you see an Annabelle doll within this movie, it's like he's putting Easter eggs in his movies, and I really appreciated that. As for the movie itself, you have Zachary Levi returning to his role as Shazam. In fact, I'm pretty sure all of the kids from the first movie return to their roles, and their adult versions of themselves return to their roles, which in my opinion is nothing but a feat of magic in and of itself, getting all of those actors to return for another movie. But don't quote me on that, because there's a good possibility that they swapped out one or two of the child actors or one or two of the adult actors, and I just didn't recognize because they're not front and center. But with all of that said, the synopsis for this movie is basically the synopsis from the first movie. You have someone who shows up trying to take the powers away from the Shazam family. And that was a little bit of a disappointment, because at the same time that it was fun and a fun movie, it was just like, hey, could we get a different villain? You just had a villain show up to try and take his powers in the first movie, and now you've got a couple of villains showing up in this movie to try and take his powers, and the only thing they really do differently is they put a dome around Philadelphia to stop anyone from going in or out, and I assume they did that because with all the DC heroes flying around the universe, you'd have someone try to come help Shazam, but in this case they can't because there's a dome around the city. That's really the only big difference. Otherwise, yeah, it's just generic villains show up, they try to take Shazam's powers, and he has to stop them. Which isn't necessarily a bad plot line, it's just basically the same plot line. But that's fine, let's move on to my likes and my dislikes. For my first like for this movie, I really enjoy the family aspect of it, and I know that that is a funny term right now because of Fast and Furious, everything's family. I get it completely. I make jokes about it myself. However, I really think it works in this movie, whether it's the kids talking to each other, the adult versions of those kids talking to each other, or a mixture of those two, where you've got some of the adult versions talking to some of the kid versions of themselves. I really like that in this movie. And the foster parents for this movie, they both come back and it works for me. You know, it wasn't like in Black Adam where there was a kid leading a revolt. In this movie, those kids, they can bring the heat themselves. They can turn into the superheroes and they can defend their family. And I love that. Plus, I come from a big family myself. So getting to see all these kids working together as a big family, it worked for me. I love the family aspect of these movies. My next like for this movie would be the comedy. I really enjoy the comedy aspect of this movie. The first movie did a good job bringing that emotional beat with comedy and mixing them together really well, and they do that again in this movie. So if you liked the comedy and the way the jokes were in the first movie, you are really going to enjoy the comedy and the jokes in this movie. And my final like for the movie is the action and CGI. I'm going to throw those together because pretty much all of the action has to be CGI in this movie. You got people flying around, you got a gigantic wooden dragon, you've got a lot of CGI in this movie, and they seem to spare no expense making it perfect, because I couldn't find flaws in it on my first viewing of this movie in a movie theater. Maybe at home I'll be able to find some things I don't like, but for the most part this movie looked really good, which is something I can say that is better than most of the MCU of the last couple of years, because the MCU has been focused on a ton of content instead of a ton of quality. I would much rather one MCU movie a year that looks perfect than 5 or 6 projects that all look mediocre at best. For dislikes, guys, I will say that I've already touched on how the bad guy in this movie is essentially the same as the bad guy in the first movie, and I wish they had given Shazam a different challenge other than just, hey, avoid this magical staff so that your powers don't get taken away from you. Another dislike I have for this movie is WB themselves. WB ruined a cameo that happens in this movie, and if you've seen any of the marketing, you know what I'm talking about at this point. I won't spoil it here, but there is a pretty big cameo that happens in this movie, and WB was just like, we need to sell tickets, show it, show it, show it. And I don't understand why they would do that, because had I experienced this in the theater for the first time, I think that would have been an even bigger moment for me. But since I knew it was coming, I was just sort of waiting for it to happen. Those are really my likes and my dislikes. I have another issue with this movie, but I feel like I have to take it out of the realm of the likes and dislikes for this movie. So we're going to move past those, and I want to talk about that. And that is, what the hell is going on with DC? Because going into this movie, I wasn't really worried about any of the stakes for any of these characters because of the shakeup that's currently happening with James Gunn and DC in general. Don't get me wrong, I understand that we should look at every movie individually, whether it's in a larger universe or not, and judge it based on its own merits. And so that's what I tried to do. I gave you my likes, I gave you my dislikes. But coming away from that and looking at this movie as something that happened within the DC universe, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I know there was a gigantic magical dome around so they could keep all the DC Universe characters out of it. That's fine. They do a cameo with one of the other DC Universe characters, and that's fine too. However, I, the fan, didn't really feel any stakes within this movie were real, because in a couple months, Flash is going to reboot the entire universe. So, I'll feel the stakes in that movie because I know Flash is rebooting. And we're going to keep some of the characters from the previous universe. The majority are going to be recast or gone. So as far as this movie goes, I don't really know what to think about it, because, okay, here I am, the viewer, watching the Shazam movie, trying to enjoy it. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, well, none of this really matters, because even if Shazam dies or lives, or any of the kids live or die, they might just be completely recasted in another movie, or they might all come back and all this might matter, but I don't know. So going into this movie, I just didn't feel like I cared. I watched it, I enjoyed it, I laughed when it was time to laugh, and I enjoyed this movie pretty much throughout the entire runtime, but in the back of my head, I was just like, none of this might matter. None of this might matter. And that's a problem, I think, with larger universe movies in general, but especially in this case, because in this case, we know for a fact everything's getting rebooted in June or July, whenever that movie comes out. So yeah, that's a big gripe I had on this movie in general, and I didn't feel like I could I can't knock the movie individually for it, but I feel like I could knock the universe for it overall. And those are all my thoughts, guys. That's my review for Shazam, Fury of the Gods. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to hit that like and the share button. If you have seen Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and you've got thoughts and comments, put that in the comment section down below, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And finally, guys, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you do that, because I have a lot of content coming your way, including a full movie theater room walkthrough when I am done redoing things down here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Alright guys, we got to the end of the review. Thanks for watching all the way to the end, and if you enjoyed this, don't forget you can check out all my 2022 reviews right there, or all my 2023 reviews right there.